Hey folks, welcome back to Gaming Garbage, where we take a look at games, chat about the gaming news in the industry, and of course, stream for fun. Today, we're talking about Nintendo, so we're going to get an update with the Switch 2 sales. We're also going to talk about the reviews of Pokemon Legends ZA, and then we're also going to be talking about the future competition and then kind of a new genre for Nintendo and also for Pal World. So, yeah, let's get into this. Because, yeah, I think it's interesting actually watching the Switch 2 with what's going on in their sales and stuff, because I think this is going to be a defining generation going forward on whether what they focused on with the Switch 2 and what they've been focusing on is really the right move. Because we've seen Xbox and PlayStation basically shift in just the last couple of years and making sure that their games are kind of everywhere, while Nintendo is still trying to maintain a truly exclusive console and using their lawyers to ensure that as well. So let's look at hardware sales first. So we're going to look at monthly. Now, just to be sure y'all understand, took me a little bit too, but yeah, this is North America. Okay, this is United States, Mexico, Canada. This is all of Europe, right? And then this is Japan. Although this may not include the UK. I'm not entirely sure on that, but yeah, that's Europe. And then this is worldwide, and worldwide sales is all of these put together, plus the rest of the world. All right? So this is actually June. So again, this is the launch with the Switch 2. Very, very good. 5.4 million sales, which is incredibly good. When we take a look at July, we had 1.6. That's about a 71% drop off. And it's not that the Switch 2s weren't available. There were some refurb ones. There were some that were returned to particular stores, like at Walmart, Target, or Best Buy, and then yeah, they were coming in some. And yeah, the fact that this is global sales is kind of surprising. And don't worry, we'll be fair. Just hold on. And then two, we had global sales for August, which was 1.1 million. So that's another like 37% drop, which is pretty good. So yeah, we can just say 35. Another third drop down for a percent. And yeah, this is the first 3 months of the Switch 2. And then when we take a look at the charts, now this is, to be fair. So yeah, this is total US monthly sales. Switch 2 versus the Switch 1. I wish this was all encompassing, but it's not. But as we can see that it's had a really good start actually over the Switch 1. And we're having a little bit of a curvature here, starting, again, really good boost to the sales, and then it's starting to taper off. We got to see that in the first 3 months of data, for at least globally, and two for the United States on VG charts. And then, yeah, each one of these little bumps here is the holidays, okay? Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever you celebrate. So this is basically, we're going to use this as like a year, okay? Span of a year. So we had a really good boost, really good boost, really good boost. And then we had this kind of crazy growth cycle right here. And so let's talk about that. This was actually the stimulus that we had in the United States. And it wasn't just the United States, it was all over the world. We literally dumped hundreds of trillions into the economies around the globe during COVID because we shut everything down. We created supply chain issues, trying to keep people employed, basically giving them free money that we're paying for later in inflation, which we're all enjoying right now. I think it's great. But yeah, this is a breakdown. And yeah, at least in the United States through the CARES Act, this could add up to actually a pretty good chunk of money. And my wife and I personally, we actually used it to pay off some debt, which was great. And then we also continue to have stimulus in 2021. There was some more. And then also, I believe, in 2022. Now, this was just for California. So again, there was a good chunk of money floating out there. And so, yeah, as we can see, the launch date was March 2017. So 17, 18, 19, and 20. Okay, this is when we would have started getting our stimulus here. And again in 21, and then in 22, it tapered off some. 23 and 24 tapered off a lot, but to be fair, we also started hearing about the Switch 2, so it makes sense that people would just want to actually wait for that. I also want to take a look at this too, so we can see a little bit better breakdown globally for actually Switch sales against the Wii U. Now, against the Wii. Yeah, I think this is the Wii U. And yeah, this is actually sourced from Nintendo. And again, we saw kind of like a really big jump in that first year from 17 to 18. 19 was a little bit better. This would have been 2020, and this would have been 2021. And yeah, just a scaled growth on that. So I'm not expecting to see that for actually Switch 2 sales. I mean, I expect it to kind of like stay pretty steady for this year to kind of basically kind of mirror this, and then for it to actually kind of start tapering off. And I expect it to cross actually here, because again, we're not going to have that stimulus money, and then we're also having the push of the PlayStation 6 and also the next gen Xbox, which there's over, there's basically 100 million users for that. There's also going to be plenty of people that are going to stick with their current gen. And some people aren't going to really want to upgrade at all. They're probably just going to move over to PC gaming. That's been happening as well. Yeah, I do expect this to actually cross over. So yeah, I think that's going to be interesting to watch, because the also, in my opinion, the whole viewpoint of the Switch 2 has been pretty horrible, generally speaking. And if we even take a look at, actually, I forgot to pull this up. If we actually take a look at Nintendo stock real quick, and we just look over the last year, that was really bad. Nobody talks about that. But if we actually take a look at this, we can see that this would have been June. So actually, the anticipation of the launch of the Switch 2, and then so investors were buying a little bit, and then we actually had the launch, and then since the launch, it's really just been kind of flat. Because we had Super Mario Kart, which again started out really, really great. Basically, 84% of sales of the Switch 2 also bought Mario Kart, which is pretty insane. So really good attachment rate. We also had Donkey Kong Bonanza the month after that. We also have a fairly solid lineup of 4 games coming even before the end of the year is over. Pokemon Legends ZA, and then Hyrule Warriors in November. Metroid Prime 4 in December. And then I forget what the 4th game is, but there's been some curtailment. And this is the middle of August until now. And it has just slowly just kind of been working its way down. And I find that surprising, because there is some turmoil in the markets right now, but there's definitely some pretty deep periods of actually selling off. And this is in August, and again in September. And this is when just some of the reviews are coming out, some of the game information is coming out, reviews on the console and what people are thinking, and really it's not as great as we were thinking. So the sentiment, I feel like, is kind of mirroring the Wii U itself, which is pretty frustrating. But so far, again, it has sold impressively well. They're saying a few of these are saying 8.6. We take a look at VG charts totals. They're at about 8.1. But again, so yeah, they're pretty close. I imagine this data would be a little bit more up to date, because again, this was October 2nd. So yeah, this was a couple of weeks ago, basically. But part of the issue too that Nintendo has is we're starting to have an issue with, like, the games are good, or the games are pretty good, but like they're good for Nintendo standards, or they're better for Nintendo standards, or for Pokemon standards, as in this case. When we take a look at some of the issues that has been going on, of course, there's always some bugs and stuff. But something that I did think was interesting is that even the Switch 2 is having some crash issues with Pokemon Legends ZA, even in docked mode. And so the idea is to keep it well ventilated. Also, there's issues with the Switch 1 as well. But yeah, even with the Switch 2, which is kind of surprising. So yeah, most crashes are reported by players using the game on the original Switch. However, at Deltia's Gaming, we had the game crash on the Switch 2 as well while playing in docked mode. And that's supposed to be the most powerful mode, and it's still crashing. So that is surprising to me a little bit, because you'd think at least the flagship titles would basically be better, or run better, or expect the bugs to actually be fixed. So yeah, their thing is keep it well ventilated. Okay, don't let it overheat. And that was one of the things that some people mentioned with the Switch 2 console, is that, yeah, it does actually get pretty hot, and that even with the fan being pretty beefy. And then also disable 120 hertz mode. So again, you're going to 60 so that you have less strain on the hardware, again, not overheating it. So yeah, it's got kind of like an overheating issue. And I just think that is pretty surprising, because again, this doesn't look overly graphically demanding. Okay, we got a couple of trees. And you look at any screenshot, the streets don't look graphically demanding, right? but the Switch 2 is still having a problem. When we take a look at the actual ratings that we have so far, again, release date was literally like what, yesterday. So this is not a ton, but again, critics have actually done their reviews so far. And I'll try to remember to post at least as a post on YouTube at Gaming Garbage 22 what the user scores are after, like a week or a couple of weeks after people have been able to play. But yeah, 79. A little lower than I expected. A 79. And then this Open Critic is at an 81 as an average. So again, those are pretty closely correlated. But the thing that I think is kind of, interesting is, again, this is a 63 with the Washington Post, is that the world just felt lifeless. And that's kind of the, that's kind of the thing a little bit. Again, there's some really good reviews as well, but there's also some lower ones too. And all of these are on the Switch too. So yeah, I just think that's interesting. And again, while there are some pretty good high reviews, there are kind of some lower ones too, also on Metacritic. And a lot of sevens, and a lot of 7s and 8s, and then a few 6s and a few 9s and a few 10s. So yeah, the game is not doing as well as I would kind of expect. And again, this is supposed to be kind of like a bigger flagship title, because this game is bundled, for Pete's sakes, with the Switch 2 right now. And apparently those are actually selling out. Which I imagine they would, because yeah, you can get the game cheaper, and that is how Nintendo is going to keep bolstering their sales, is by incentivizing more of these bundles. And I think we'll continue to see more. I honestly expect for Metroid Prime 4, I think we'll probably hear that at the end of October or in November. Hey, there's a bundle, because Metroid Prime 4 is going to be a pretty big title. But it used to be, the bundle was just Mario Kart, and I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case. I think ultimately they know that this chart's going to be hard to beat, generally speaking, and so they're going to want to keep those sales up as much as they can and not have it cross over, because that's going to be deemed as a failure or whatever. And I still think they'll make plenty of money. But again, $450 for the quality of games that we've been getting, and still for the issues that we have, and two, just the sentiment around how Nintendo is dealing with stuff, including with Pal World, isn't necessarily great. Now, Pal World for itself, again, it's not just tied to the Switch 2. It's basically tied to just basically anywhere that you can actually play video games. And it shows because of all of the copies that it's sold. It's sold, last I remember, it sold over 30 million copies so far. And this is just with a couple of days ago. And, currently there's 36,000 players, which is pretty good for Steam for just any particular type of game. But this had a total peak of 2.1 million players in 2024. And again, Pal World, with some competition, they've been able to find where the line is with Nintendo's IPs, and they're like, look, we can be heavily inspired. That's not crossing the line. And so Nintendo is now, still suing them for patents, but then Pal World has also made adjustments. But it's just not necessarily stopping there. We also have Pal Farm, which is the next thing. And we actually got to see this after the release date announcement for Potopia. I know I'm not saying that right. But yeah, we'll just take a look at this and just notice the detail and the stuff in the background and the plant life and just the textures of different things. The different activities that you can do and focus on, even just like the mural on the ground there that looks like stained glass. And yeah, it honestly looks pretty good. And then this is Pocopia. And yeah, this was announced during their September Direct, and it looks like Minecraft. Like this, in my opinion, this just looks like generic stuff. So they're taking the idea of finding Pokemon in grass and a Minecraft world, which again looks like there's also some different materials that you can use to build and stuff, and then you can basically build kind of like your farm, if you will, your kind of cozy game. And this honestly just looks weak. One thing that is cool, though, is that you can engage and find different Pokemon, and then you can gain some of their abilities to actually work on improving things in your world. So again, that's cool. But again, we look at I look at this, versus this. And I would rather play this. It looks better. It looks more well thought out. We can have bunnies with chainsaws for Pete's sakes, and we can we can help our Pokemon. That's a little dark right there, and but yeah, we go back to this, and it doesn't look good. And I guarantee you that Pal Farm is going to be cheaper than Pokopia is. Pokopia is probably going to be $60. I hope it's not 70, because it's nowhere near worth that in my opinion. But yeah, we'll have ultimately we'll have to see. We have a lot of the mechanics from Minecraft. We have a table. There's different things we can build. We kind of like work on building our farm here. But again, I'd rather play Pal Farm. And probably at a cheaper price, too, for launch. And since it's going to be a platform that's everywhere, it's not just going to be tied just to the Switch 2. Pal Farm's going to sell everywhere. And so they're ultimately, I think, excuse me, going to make more revenue and make more money. And we're going to continue to have this competition with Nintendo and with Pal World, with Pocket Pair. So yeah, I think it's very interesting what's going on, because I think the walled garden that Nintendo has worked so hard to build is literally cracking. And I think that's also going to affect sales down the line. Because if you can basically get the same experience somewhere else, at a cheaper price, or a better experience at a cheaper price, why wouldn't you? And I think too of like Lego Party. Let's pull that up real quick. I've already shown this once, but yeah, this is going to be Lego Party. And I mean, this looks exactly like Mario Party. It's just Legos. But yeah, we have a map. We have different stuff. Of course, you have different dice, and you have, a bunch of different mini games. And this actually looks kind of fun. I kind of want to grab this. Again, I want to see what the price is. Also, too, there's Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, which there's actually a demo out for this. And yeah, I mean, this is basically Mario Kart. So again, if you can get it on your platform, if you can get something similar, for roughly the same cost, or maybe even cheaper, it breeds competition. Why would you go buy a $450 system? That's partly my argument, is like Nintendo had the opportunity to really take a good console and launch it really well and not fight their audience or their consumer base. But I mean, again, that's what they've been doing. They screwed up Mario Kart World. Donkey Kong Bonanza was a flash in the frying pan. And when you look at some of the content, it's like, wow, this is $70. That's kind of expensive. Wow, the DLC is $20 when it's just a roguelike. That's kind of insane. And then there's alternatives to their games too that we've been seeing. And I think we will continue to see this. Because so far we have we have TT, Sega, and Pocket Pair all making heavily inspired Nintendo games. And I mean, through the generation, I'm not sure what Nintendo's going to do. But I do think ultimately this is good, because I don't think monopolies are good for the consumer. Their quality is worse. There's less options. And there's, competition is good. It's a wonderful thing. So yeah, we'll have to see really what happens. But I do think Nintendo has a problem. And while it started really, really good out of the gate, I am assuming that, down the road, they're not going to be able to keep up. Of course, the stimulus, that's certainly one thing. But two, just the sentiment around the whole thing. All of the channels talking about Nintendo, they basically don't really talk about Nintendo much anymore. And it's only been, 4 months. This is kind of surprising. I also see Switch 2s sitting on the shelf longer and longer. I mean, Target still had ones a couple weeks after they got new ones in stock. So I'm going to keep up with this story because I'm curious about it, but I think Nintendo needs to understand that they don't have really a walled garden anymore. It looks like they do, but when people can be heavily inspired and devs can make stuff and make a ton of money from it, like Pal World, they've roughly made, doing the math, they've roughly made probably $400 million, $500 million. And then official release 1.0 is going to be next year in 2026. And again, if you can get the experience for cheaper or have the experience even be better and the higher quality with less issues and bugs, and you don't have devs and publisher that are fighting you all the time and not allowing you to stream and taking all your stuff down, it's just, yeah, Nintendo is just brewing bad sentiment. And that's going to be a problem for them. So thanks for tuning in, folks. You can always follow me at Gaming Garbage 22. We have playlists there of different stuff, and if something's not for you, don't worry about it. There's various content every single week. Also, too, you can follow me over at Twitch if you'd like. And yeah, when I'm playing video games, definitely, talk in the chat. Let me know that you're interested, that you're there, and then yeah, I'll definitely talk back. So with that, folks, we'll see you guys on the next one.